Hello everybody, this is Goji73 here with a response video. For those of you who may or may not know, a few months ago, MONSTROSITIES, the Tokusatsu vlog on YouTube, has started a recent trend known as Tag, You're It. A series of videos in which 4 randomly selected users send a 5-part questionnaire to certain users who get tagged by people who, in turn, were tagged as well, and so on and so on and so forth. As it just so happens, I have been tagged by none other than fellow kaiju YouTuber DaikaijuLegends to answer his 5 questions as part of the series. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 1. What was your introduction to kaiju? 5 films off the top of my head that I remember the most from my childhood were King Kong vs. Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Monster Zero, Godzilla's Revenge, and Godzilla vs. Megalon. King Kong and Monster Zero, primarily because those 2 films were my father's favorite, as well as my mother. Those were both their favorite films. Mothra vs. Godzilla because it and King of the Monsters and Monster Zero were all recorded on one VHS tape that I used to watch very often when I was little. And of the Godzilla as a bad guy films of the Showa era, that film is my favorite. Godzilla's Revenge because that film is a big guilty pleasure for me, despite how much everybody despises it. I actually really like it very much, for its sweet and simple nature. And Godzilla vs. Megalon because, of course, that is my favorite Godzilla film of all time. 3 other films that I used to watch as well, but not as often as the top 5 I just mentioned, were Godzilla Raids Again, primarily for the Anguirus battle in Osaka, Godzilla vs. Gigan, and Mechagodzilla because it was one of those other films that I would often rotate watching because there weren't that many Godzilla films that were available on VHS at the time where I live. So yeah, those 5 films, 8 if you include the lesser ones, those were my introduction to kaiju when I was little. Number 2. What is my dream kaiju fight? Now, because my opinions change over time, instead of narrowing it down to just one, because that would be too tough for me to decide on, I have decided to rack up my top 10 dream fights I would like to see at some point. So here they are. Godzilla vs. Gamera, obviously. King Kong vs. Mothra. Velocrone vs. Vakashim vs. Doragori in a triple threat. Tyrant vs. Five King. EX Gomora vs. EX Red King. Shin Godzilla vs. If. Mechagodzilla vs. King Joe. Windom, Mikolas and Agira vs. Zeton. Godzilla vs. Gomora. And Silvergon vs. Goldross. Those 10 fights I'd like to see at some point. Some will be impossible, some are possible, but there you go. Number 3. How would you reboot Gamera today? Perhaps the most difficult question I had because, personally, even I wouldn't know how I would reboot Gamera to this day. After thinking about it some, I have decided that this is how I would reboot Gamera. I would take a lot of elements from the Heisei trilogy because unquestionably those are Gamera's best films, but I would also like to give it more of a Showa tone to it, not unlike Gamera the Brave, but more or less still have a serious tone but still have a little bit of fun, if you know what I mean. Gamera would still be a guardian, he would protect the Earth from evil monsters and all that, still be a little bit more serious, but still have somewhat of a acknowledgement towards the humans, or some sort of compassion towards them or something like that. But that's basically it. Very Heisei, but not afraid to have a little fun here and there. Some other stuff I probably would do if I could reboot Gamera is have some way to implement children to some capacity. Not unlike the Showa films where they're the prime focus of the entire film or series, but kind of sort of make them relevant in a ways. Like similar to the Digidestins from Digimon, or even the Little Stars from Ultraman Geed, where some children, a select handful, or even just children in general, have some sort of power they can give Gamera. Like, one aspect about the Heisei films that I did like is that as long as you believe in Gamera, not serenade him, but just believe in him, that he will always win, and I kind of like that. And the children, like, having faith in him is what gives him strength, if you know what I mean. Similar to, like, how Ultraman works, something along those lines. Another thing is possibly give Gamera some allies. Don't get me wrong, Gamera as a standalone hero is kind of cool, but I wouldn't be against the idea of having him be given some allies to fight back against some monsters. Because, you know, we've got Anguirus, and he is my most favorite Godzilla monster of all time. Maybe Gamera have an Anguirus of his own to some degree, or some partner that helped him during his time protecting Atlantis or whatever. And the last bit, as I just mentioned, is kind of continue the whole Atlantean origin thing. Like, what was it about Atlantis that made them create Gamera? Or the Gauss, or whatever. Like, expand upon that, sort of. But yeah, that's how I'd reboot Gamera. Heisei, but not afraid to have a little fun. Make children relevant, but not annoying. Give Gamera some allies, and continue the Atlantean origin story or whatever. Number 4. What is your favorite Tokusatsu series? Simplest answer, Ultraman Mebius and the Ultra Galaxy series, because that's what helped me get into Ultraman, but after watching the shows, while I still enjoy them to some degree, their stories are very, very self-contained. I still like them, don't get me wrong, but I just like Mebius a little bit more for its story and a bunch of other elements in it. And number 5, what is your favorite G-Fest memory? Again, because my opinions change over time, I decided to list a whole bunch of them together. Looking back on all my years of going to G-Fest, my favorite moments have to be, number 1, participating in the costume parade for G-Fest 11, which was my first time going to G-Fest. Number 2, going to watch Tokyo SOS at the Pickwick for the first time ever. While I don't have a high opinion on SOS, just going to watch a Godzilla movie with an audience that loves Godzilla is just an incredible experience, and because this was the night of Tokyo SOS's debut, yeah, you can think of it as like a G-rated version of a Rocky event. Number 3, meeting my Skype friends for the first time ever. This is G-Fest 17 and 18. 17 was where I met Nick Jones for the first time ever, and 18 was where I met Kyle and everybody else there. Number 4, being part of the panels I was a part of for the past few G-Fests, so like the film festival, the YouTubers panel, those were all very great memories for me because it goes to show that people actually like the work that I've put into all my fan films. Number 5, the G-Fest 19 all-nighter. Many of you don't know this, but at G-Fest 19, me, Kyle, Nick, and a few other friends actually had an all-nighter on the last day of G-Fest, and it was wild and crazy, let's just put it that way. And number 6, meeting Haruo Nakajima. What better way than to add a perfect memory to G-Fest than to add the time I met the man who played Godzilla, the late great Haruo Nakajima. And so, that just about answers all of my tag questions. DaikaijuLegends, I hope you're happy with what I've given you, and as for who I'm tagging next, the people who I will be tagging are JW, Yao9, Ultraman Explained, and Boats Can Fly. And to everybody who I've just tagged, here are my questions for all of you. 1. Which scrap Godzilla, Gamera, or Ultraman film would you have liked to have seen be made and why? 2. Which Ultra monster, or alien, would you like to see be reintroduced and why? 3. If you plan on coming to a future G-Fest, or if you've already been to a G-Fest, which event or contest would you like to take part in the most and why? Number 4. Which kaiju film is a guilty pleasure for you? And number 5. Which kaiju series would you like to see have a crossover, and which other series would you cross over it into? With that all said, this was pretty fun. It's a nice way of bringing the fandom together for a little fun, and it's just nice to see some positivity for once on here. Can't wait to see you guys' answers to them. Until then, see you later.